We begin today the Gemara on Bava Kama right at the beginning of the Yamud. The Gemara goes back to the conclusion of the Mishnah, or almost the conclusion, where it said Hatzad Hashava Shebehen. First, the Mishnah pointed out the various differences that there are, Lo Yarei Shakare Amave, and so on. That the Torah, if it would write one, you can't learn out the other from it. But then the Mishnah finishes off and says Hatzad Hashava Shebehen, that there's a common denominator of all the Avis Nezikin, Shedarka Lahazik, Shmirasan Alecha, or Kishahizik Chavamazik Lashalam Tashlumin Ezek. They all, it's your money, you have the obligation to guard it, and therefore if you did not, and it was Mazik, you chayiv to pay. That's the Tzad HaShavah the Mishnah says. Okay, Tzad HaShavah Shebehen, Zok the Gemara. So what is this Tzad HaShavah coming to add? If the Mishnah is saying this Tzad HaShavah, that means that it's trying to point out that you could have something else that doesn't fit into any one of these categories of the above Nezikin. But if you put together the Tzad HaShavah, you'll be able to be marbe. You can add something else. What else are we adding through this Tzad HaShavah here? So the Gemara is going to bring a few pshatim for this. First pshat is Amar Abaya. Abaya says Lasuye Avnai Sakinai Umasoi Shenicham Beroish Gagoy. This comes to add a case where a person put a rock, a knife, or a package on the top of a roof, and then what happened? V'naflu beruach mitzuyi. He puts it at the edge of the roof, and it's light enough that a regular wind can carry it and blow it off, and it can damage someone that way. So that is something which cannot be learned from any of the Avis Nezikin, but it could only be learned by a Tzad HaShavah. But the Gemara asks, why do you need a Tzad HaShavah for this? Hey Chidami, what are we talking about over here? If we're talking about this rock or this knife, and while it was flying, it was mazik someone. So Hainuesh, it's the exact same thing as the of Eish. Ma'esh, no Eish. What's the difference? How does fire work? The koyach achem u'rev boy, that you light the fire in one place, but then the wind comes and blows, and then as it goes, as the wind is blowing it, it's consuming things, it's burning. And this is your money, your shmiras alecha, and you have to guard this fire, and you chayev for it. So the same thing over here also, with this rock that you placed on the roof, and the wind blows it, and as it's going, it's mazik someone. So you don't need the Tzad HaShavah for that, it's exactly identical to Eish. What are you going to say? What are we talking about? Basa denaichi. After this rock, you put it on the rooftop, and then it landed in the Rishus Harabim, and now in the Rishus Harabim, someone stumbled on it and got damaged. So over here as well, you don't need a Tzad HaShavah, because if when it was there in the Rishus Harabim, so you left it there and you just were mafkir it, you declared it hefker. So in such a case, it's exactly like Bayer, because Bein l'Rav, Bein l'Shmuel, both Rav and Shmuel will agree that Hainu Bayer. This is exactly what a Bayer is. A Bayer is a pit which someone stumbles and falls into. This is also a stumbling block in the middle of the Rishus Harabim. That's when you're mafkir it. And the Gemara explains, Ma'ishno Bayer, why should it be any different than Bayer? Shekain tchilas asiyasai lenezek. The Bayer is tchilas asiyasai, it's made there, it's put there in a way that it can be masik someone. And this is your money. The Torah considers it to be like your money, and you have to guard it, that no one should fall into it. As the Torah says, you have to cover the Bayer. This too, you put it on a rooftop in a place where the wind can easily take it. Ruach mitzuya. A wind takes it and blows it and it falls down. So you put it in a place that it's made to be mazik, and it's considered to be your money, your shmirasan alecha, and this, you have a shmira on this, and you chayev. So it's identical to Bayer. So you don't need a Tzad HaShavah for this. Now, why did we say before, Bein l'Rav, Bein l'Shmuel? Because Rav and Shmuel said when it's hefker, we could compare it to Bayer. So Eli, you're going to say the case here is, the lo yafkirinu. He was not mafkir it. If you're not mafkir it, so then it's not exactly the same as Bayer, because Bayer is something which is hefker. So then maybe you can't learn it out just from Bayer alone. But the Gemara says, but nevertheless, l'Shmuel, according to Shmuel, this is still a question. The Amar, Shmuel said, Kulam mi Bayrei lamadnu. Any stumbling block that you leave in the Rishus Harabim, whether you were mafkir it or not, it's the same as the Bayer that's there, and it causes people to trip and stumble over it. So if so, Hainu Bayer, it's the exact same thing as Bayer. So why do we need a Tzad HaShavah to teach the Ichaya for this Hezek here? So the Gemara answers, Lo'ilam, really we can go back to what we said before, Daf Kirino. What happened is this Avnai Sekine Masah, he put it on a roof and the wind blew it down, and now it's in the Rishus Harabim, and once it's there, he was mafkir it. and it was mazik someone, but fully damul bayr. No, you cannot learn it out from bayr. Why not? Mala bayr, because by the bayr, what happens when it's mazik someone? Shekain ein koyach achamorav bayr. In order for it to be there, in the position that it is to be mazik someone, it didn't need any other koyach. It didn't need a wind to get it to the place where it is. You dug the pit right there into the Rishus Harabim. That's why it's mazik someone. So therefore you're responsible. But over here, Taima Bahani, over here, these items that you placed on the rooftop, shekoyach achamorav ben. The person could say, I don't have as much as a responsibility. I put it on the rooftop. The fact that the wind comes along and blows it, it's true, it's a ruach mitzuya, and it's to be expected, but still it's not the same as bayr, which you dug it right there in the middle of the Rishus Harabim. So you can't learn it directly from bayr. So the fact that you chayiv for something where there's a koyach acher, there's a wind that helps the hezek happen, and you're still responsible, so that I can learn from eish. But on the other hand, you can't compare this to eish either, because mala eish eish, fire is always moving. It's always going from one place to another. So you know the nature of fire, that it moves constantly, so you have to have more of a caution with it. Over here, though, once this lands on the floor, it's staying in one place. It doesn't have that kind of a movement the way fire does. So you can't compare it to eish either. So you have to learn it out from bayr to prove that even if it's sitting there in one place in the Rishus Harabim, you'll be chayiv. So this is the tzad hashava. This is a kind of a hezek that is daimit to bayr in one way, it's daimit to eish in another way. Now v'chazar adin. So therefore, we learn it from both. We say that by eish and bayr, the sibbe, the cause for its chiyuv, is not the unique nature that it has, because I see that the Torah was mechayev by both of them. What's the tzad hashava? That it's memaynach, shmiras and alecha. So I say the same thing with this case of avnes akinim masai that you put on the rooftop and it flew down to the Rishus Harabim, and over there you mafkir it, that you're going to be chayev for this. That's what the tzad shava of the Mishnah comes to be marbe. The Gemara is going to give here another more terutzim that are very similar to this teretz. Just to mention bekitzer, there's a general machlekes rishonim about this Gemara which the Rosh brings. According to some rishonim, that would mean that since this is a kind of a hezek that we learn out from bayr and eish together, so what kind of halachas is it going to have? Is it going to have the halacha of bayr or the halacha of eish? We learned before in the end of Daf Hey Mid Beis, the Gemara says that every single av of the Avos Nezikin has its own halachas, its own kulas or its own chumris. So is this going to be like bayr or like eish? So some rishonim say, well, if you learn it out from both, it's going to have the kulas of bayr and the kula of eish. We learned before, bayr is potter for kalim or potter for adam that got damaged by it. Eish is potter on tomun and so on. So it's going to have the kulas of both. The Rosh himself, however, says that no. The way to understand this teretz here, and the following terutzim that we're going to learn over here soon, is that be'emes, it's more daimit to bayr. This avnes akinim asay, b'poil now when it damages, it's a stumbling block in the Rishus Harabim, it's basically bayr. But there's a certain detail about it which bayr doesn't have, that it originated on the rooftop and it needed the wind to bring it here. That detail we learn from eish, but be'etzem, it's a bayr. And therefore has the halachas like a bayr. So another example, another teretz, the Gemara says, Rava Amar lasuye bayra mizgalgal beragle yodam uberagle beheme. What this is coming to add at tzad hashava is a person put down something in the Rishus Harabim, a stumbling block, but it wasn't mazik in the place where it was. Someone else came and kicked it, or an animal came and kicked it, and then in this new location where it ends up in, it was megalgal, that new location, that's where it was mazik. That's what we need a tzad hashava for. So the Gemara is going to spell out over here clearly why do we need a tzad hashava for this. Hey chidami, what are we talking about? If when the person put this down, he was mafkirit. So then, as we said before, bein l'rav, bein l'shmuel, hainu bayr. So if it's a stumbling block in the Rishus Harabim which you put there and it's hefker, so that's exactly identical to bayr. A boy which is made, you put it there in a place where it could be mazik and you have to guard it. You put it in the street and it's in a place where it could be mazik, so you have to guard it. The fact that someone kicked it later, shouldn't matter. So it's identical to bar. Ella says the Gemara, if you're going to say that he was not mafkirit, the Shmuel, the Amar, Kulami Bayre Lamadnu. So Shmuel that said that all of these are learned out from Bayr. In any stumbling block you put into the Rishus Harabim, even if you were not mafkirit, it's also learned out from Bayr. So Hainu Bayr. So if so, it's also identical to Bayr. So why do you need another source besides Bayr to teach me that you would be chayev? Okay, so Taisvus here actually brings, there's another gersa in the Gemara. The Gemara here is discussing the responsibility of the person that owns these objects and went and put it down in the Rishus Harabim. whether he was mafkir, whether he was not mafkir. But then there's another thing you could discuss. How about the person that kicked it? The one that was megalgalit. Maybe if he kicked it into a new position, maybe now he's the one that should be chayiv for this, right? And so Taisus here brings a gerse. If this person went and kicked it, so then how was it mazik when he kicked it? If it was mazik after it landed, so then weiter, it's just a but. The first person put it in one place in the Rishus Harabim, you kicked it to another place. So then that would just be but. It was mazik after it just landed and it's stationary in one place. But what the Gemara is saying though, according to the Gersa of Taisvis, if someone came and kicked it, and while you kicked it and it's flying, it was mazik something on the way, so then you should be koy. So then it's a odom hamazik. It's like if you do something that comes directly from your koyach, so then you chayiv just like anything else that comes directly from you. It's your koyach. The Gemara had another example for this before. If a person has any fluids, liquids that comes out of his body, and while it comes out of his body, he's not paying attention, he's not careful about it, then it's mazik something. Koy. That's something that comes from your koyach, and it's odom hamazik. So over here as well, the Gemara adds, not only regarding the person that puts it down, but also regarding the person that kicked it, if it's being mazik while it's going, so that's odom mazik. That's another gear that Taisus brings here.
Even if it was the first guy or the second guy that kicked it to a new place?
It's the second guy that kicked it to a new place. So yeah, in Chanami, it could be that the second guy is chayiv. Right? So the Gemara doesn't discuss that. Right, it could be the second guy is chayiv, but the question of the Gemara still remains a question that you could learn it just from bar. You don't have to learn it from bar and eish or something else together. But here the Gemara is going to say actually that the second guy is not chayiv. No, the second guy, he didn't put it into the Rishus Harabim. What happened? He was walking, and while he was walking, why did the second guy kick it? Taisus brings from the Gemara that says in Naminiach, the reason why he kick it is because when a person is walking in the street, he's not expected to pay attention to these things that are in the street. That's why he kicked it. Right, so the second guy is not going to be chayiv. The first guy that put it down is going to be chayiv. If when the second guy kicks it, while it's flying, it's mazik, Taisus says, that must mean that you kicked it with such a force that it lifted up off the ground and it was able to be mazik something, then maybe the second guy would be chayiv. But if the second guy kicks it and it's mazik in the new place where it comes to, the first guy's chayiv, because the second guy is just walking. He didn't pay attention to what he was doing. Okay, but the question still remains, why do you need anything more than just bar? So the Gemara explains again, similar to the point we learned before, La'olam da'afkirinu. Really the case over here is that the person was mafkirit when he put it down, but still v'lei dami lebar. In this place where you put it in one location, now ends up in another place, and there it was mazik, it's not exactly the same as bar. Because ma'la bar shekei ma'asav garmuloi. By the bar, the action that you did, you dug this pit right over here. That's the action that causes the hezek. There's nothing additional that happened there. Taimar bahani, over here you could argue and say, she'ein ma'asav garmuloi. That it's not just my actions that has guided this. There is the action that he did, that he put it in the Rishus Harabim, but you needed another action of an animal or a person to kick it somewhere else, and only in that new location was it mazik someone. So shar yechiach, what you learn, so therefore you have shar. When an ox scores and damages, you can prove from there that in such a case you're also chayav. The ox, you go with your ox in one place, and the ox walks to another place, and it damages in another location where you did not put your ox, and still you're chayav. On the other hand, you can't compare our case to shayr either. The shayr is a different nature altogether. It walks around. It always walks around. This stumbling thing that you put down, you put it in one place. It's not alive like a shayr that walks around. So therefore, you compare it back to bar. You compare it to both of them, each one, and there's the tzad hashava. Lo yirizeh kirizeh. They're not exactly the same, but there's the tzad hashava that it's your money, and you have to guard it, and you chayiv if it's mazik, and the same thing also regarding this bar hamizgalgal. You put it in one place, and it rolled somewhere else. A third answer, also similar inyan, Ravada Barav Omar Lasuye Hodetanya. The tzad hashava of our Mishnah comes and is marbe, another kind of hezek, like we learned in the Braisa. So the Braisa says as follows: Kol elu shamru. There are those cases that Chachamim said, Paiskim bivayseyen. If you have the drainage from sewage that comes out of your property, so you're allowed to unclog this drainage to let it flow out from your property to get rid of it, and it flows into the street. And also the gerfim mariseyen. If you have these caves that have in it also these sewage waters that you want to dispose of, you're allowed to unclog it and let it go into the street. When are you allowed to do this? B'maisa Kama, if it's during the summer when the streets are clear and it's nice and it's not wet, it's not muddy, Eilem Rishus, you don't have the permission to empty out your dirty water into the street. B'maisa Geshamim, however, in the winter, so since anyways the streets are all wet and muddy and dirty, so then Yeshlam Rishus, then you have permission, you're allowed to empty out your sewage into the street. But Aval Pichib Rishus, even though you have permission to do this, but it's going to be your responsibility for whatever happens with it. Chachamim gave you the rishus to do this, but you have to be responsible to make sure that it's not going to damage anybody. That's the Braisa. Okay, so over here, what the Gemara is saying is this kind of a hezek that will be caused by the fact that you unclogged the drainage of your sewage into the street. That's what we need a tzad hashava for. The Gemara spells this out again over here. Hey Chidami, what are we talking about over here? If the person's standing there, he's unclogging this drainage, this sewage, and as he unclogs it, and the force that comes out, then it's mazik, as it's flowing out. If so, koichayu. This is directly coming from his koyach, so he should be chayiv as an adam mazik. You just did something directly that caused the damage. The case over here is that the drainage went out, the sewage went out into the street, and it's sitting there. Someone passed by later and slipped on it. So then it should be like, but again, the Gemara goes through what we said before. Hey, Chidami, what are we talking about? If you and Mafka is there, so then Bein L'Rav, Bein L'Shmuel, both of them agree. Hainu bar. This is identical to bar. Bye, you made it there for a nezek. It's your money. Torah considers it to be a money, and you have to guard it. Draining out into the street, it's slippery, so this isn't something which can cause nezek. This is yours, and you have to take responsibility for this.
It was slippery before too.
And a chanami, but kanire, it's more slippery. It's something that obviously you're only going to be chayiv in a case where it's clear that it's your drainage that caused it, not just the rain or any other mud that caused it. Elo. So what are we going to say? What are we talking about? The loyav kirina. It was not mafkirit, as we said before. But Shmuel holds l'Shmuel the Ama Kula mibayre lamadnu. Even when you're not mafkirit, it's still part of the av of bar. So haina bar. It's the exact same thing as bar. So the Gemara answers la'olam daf kirina. We can say that you wore mafkir your this sewage that went out. You're mafkirit. But when this is mazik, it's still not the same as bar. Why not? When you dig a pit in the middle of the Rishus Harabim, you have no permission to do this. So you could say, I am chayiv because what I did it was without any rishus. Taima bahani over here, though, this is a unique thing. The rishus. On one hand, Chacham was saying people have to live. They have to have the ability to drain their sewage out of their property. So Chacham in the winter gave rishus to do this. So maybe you would argue to say, if Chacham are giving me the rishos, so then I'm not responsible for anything that happens afterwards. Maybe Adarab, maybe the people traveling in Rishus Harabim that know that it's the winter, and now people have rishus to drain their properties. Maybe it's the people of the Rishus Harabim that have to be extra cautious. So who says I'm responsible? Shor yechiach. So therefore, you can bring a raya from a shor. What's a shor? A shor, you have rishus to walk with your shor in the middle of a Rishus Harabim. Everybody has a rishus to go into the Rishus Harabim, but nevertheless, even though you have rishus to take your shor into the Rishus Harabim, but if your shor is going to be mazik there, you're going to be chayiv. So you can learn from shor regarding draining your sewage, the same thing. But on the other hand, you can't compare it to shor because mal shor can dark lahazik. Shor, there's a unique reason why you have to be cautious and responsible because that's the nature of shor. It walks around and it could get out of control. Over here, the drainage, the sewage, it drains out and it stays stationary in one place. So therefore, bar techiach, you can learn from bar that even something that's in one place you chayiv. And v'chazar adin, so we learn from both, from bar and shor together, the tzad hashava that you chayiv because it's memaynach shmirasi alecha. So too regarding this drainage of the sewage. One more pshat the Gemara brings. Ravina says, what is the tzad hashava of the Mishnah coming to add? Lasuya hadatnan. It's coming to add the following case that's later in the Mishnah here, later in the, actually this is not here in the Masechta, this is in Bava Metzia. What does the Mishnah say? Hakaisel va'ilon, person had a wall that was near the Rishus Harabim, or he had a tree in his property, but it's near the Rishus Harabim. Shenaflu Rishus Harabim, and they fell from his property into the Rishus Harabim, and then v'iziku, after it fell there, it was mazik someone, pater melashalem. So you're going to be pater to pay for this damage that it caused. Okay, now here the Mishnah says though, Nosnu leizman lokutze ilon. What happens if you have a boir that's near the Rishus Harabim? Not a boir, sorry. You have a wall or a tree that's near the Rishus Harabim, and he was given a period of time by when he has to cut off this tree or velister as a kaisel to get rid of this wall. And the reason is because it was a tree that you saw that it's going to fall sooner or later. Or it's a wall that's very, very shaky and it's going to fall sooner or later. And and then it fell within that time period that he was given to cut it down or to get rid of this wall. It fell within that time period. Vizik, and it was mazik. Potter, then it's positive. If it was mazik as it fell, or if it was mazik immediately right after it fell, and he didn't have a chance to clean it up, just like in the Reisha of the Mishnah, he didn't expect this wall to fall. He didn't expect this tree to fall. Over here as well, he was given a time period, and he before that time period it already fell. So for that, it's going to be potter. But if after that time period he still doesn't get rid of his shaky wall or his dangerous tree, and then it fell and it damaged, chayev. In such a case, he's going to be chayev for the damage that it causes. So this is the kind of a damage that you can't learn out from any one of the Avos Nezikin. You have to learn it out from a Tzad Shara. Now the Gemara explains why that is. Hey Chidami, what's the case over here? If when it fell into the Rishus Harabim, he was mafkeret, so then Ben L'Rab, Ben L'Shmuel, Hainu Bar. It's sitting there in the Rishus Harabim as a stumbling block. It's exactly like Bar. Just like a bar, the hezek of a bar is common. Here the Gemara brings another point about what bar is. Till now, we always say about bar that what's unique about bar is the fact that you dug it, you made it, and it's something which is mazik. Here the Gemara can't say that when it wants to compare this tree or wall to bar, because you can't say that the tree that was built or the tree that was planted or the wall that was built is tchilas asiyas lenezek. It wasn't made for a nezek. So the Gemara here now is explaining a different svara. Why is this compared to bar? A bar that you dig in the middle of the Rishus Harabim has zekei matzai. It's very common that someone should stumble on this and fall into it. And you have to guard it. So too, this wall and this tree that you see is about to fall, it's shaky, and he was warned to take it down. It's also something that it's a zeke motzi shmiras yalecha. So it's exact same as bar. If it was not mafke, this the Shmuel. Shmuel says, anyways, we learn everything out from bar, even if it's not afker. Hainu bar, it's the exact same thing as bar. Okay, now Taisus over here discusses another detail which the Gemara does not bring up. When was this wall that fell or this tree that fell, when was it mazik? Similar to what the Gemara before discussed, was it mazik as it was flying or as it was moving? Over here as well, you can discuss when was this mazik? Was it mazik as it fell down, on its way down, it was mazik someone that was there, fell on someone? Or was it mazik after it already fell and later someone came and stumbled upon it? If it fell after it's on the ground, so then everything the Gemara here is saying makes sense. It's exactly like bar. But if it fell as it's on its way down, so then it's not so simple to say that it's similar to bar. It's being mazik on its way down. It's actually more similar to eish, fire, which some wind, some ruach mitzuya. This was a shaky wall already, so a ruach mitzuya came and threw it down. So then in that case, it's going to be similar to eish. Okay, so there's a discussion in Taisus about this. Okay, weiter. So the Gemara says no, that it can't be compared to bar. Why is that? Really, the case over here is this wall fell, this tree fell, and he was mafkirit. But you still can't compare it to bar, because by bar you dug it into the Rishus Harabim, and you're making a stumbling block for people. So you're chayav for that. That's why you're responsible. This tree, this wall that was there, it was planted, it was built in a place that was in your property, and it was safe and sound. Later on, it deteriorated. So later on, it's something that could cause damage. So you can't compare it to a bar. So shar yichiyach. So therefore, you have to prove from shar. A shar is not an animal which you could say tchilas asiyasa is lenezek. It's an animal that was created, that was born. So nevertheless, you're chayav for what the animal does. But on the other hand, you can't compare it to shayr either, because shayr is a living being that goes around, not this tree and the wall. So bar techich, you learn out from bar, b'chazar adin, that's the tzad hashava, we learn out that it's mamayinach, shmiras yalecha, and yechayev, and so too in this case, you're going to be chayev as well. So those are we had over here 4 tirutzim of what are the additional things that were marba from the tzad hashava. Going back to the language of the Mishnah, kishehizik chov hamazik. So the end of the... Again? if you learn these things out from the tzad hashava, if it's called an av, l'chayre not. It's not. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, in other words, it's learned out from a tzad hashava, right? It's not called a toilde either, right? But l'chayre, I don't see how it could be a av. Rashi says a av is something which is mefurish b'kra. That's the first Rashi in the Masechta. These are things that are not mefurish b'kra. What? The nezek was going to be Shalom what? So I mentioned before, it's a machlokes rishonim if it's compared to bayr or it's yichayev like the tzad hashava, you compare it to both. And it has the coolest of both. Okay, so it said of the Mishnah, hizik chav hamazik. So this lashon of the end of the tzad hashava, that when you were mazik, so chav hamazik, the mazik is chayev. So this lashon is unusual. Says the Gemara, chav hamazik. Why does it say chav? Chayev hamazik. It's chayev. Chayev means you're chayev to pay. Why does it say this term chav? Chayev hamazik mi baile. Omer Rav Yudah Omer Rav. Hi Tana Yerushalmihu. This Tana is a Tana that came from Eretz Yisrael, from Yerushalayim. The Tana Lishna Kalila. He uses this kind of lashon which is more bekitzer. He uses chav instead of chayev. That's the way they spoke there. So therefore, that's the unique lashon. Okay. Now, what did the Gemara say? L'shalem tashlumi nezek. You have to pay the tashlumi nezek. And the Mishnah says, what's this tashlumi nezek? B'meitav aretz. You have to pay from the best, from the idis, from the best of your properties. So here, the whole next sugi for the next few blot, we'll be discussing this halacha that a mazik is obligated to pay from meitav, from the best. What's the source for this? Tan Rabbanim we learned in the Braisa, the pasuk says, meitav sadeyu, meitav karma yishalim. That when a mazik pays, he has to pay from the best of his fields or the best of his vineyard. So what does this mean? Meitav sadeyu shal nizik or meitav karma shal nizik. You have to pay according to the best value of the nizik's property or the nizik's vineyard, which simply would mean if you were mazik an area in this person's property and you weren't mazik the best of his property, you were mazik a low quality place in his property, but nevertheless you're going to have to pay him as if you were mazik the best piece of quality of his property. That's what the Gemara understands it at this point. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. That's what Rabbi Shmuel says. So you're basically paying extra. But Rabbi Kiva says no. What's the pasuk coming and saying over here? That you have to pay from the best of the mazik, meaning that you evaluate what you damaged. You don't pay extra. You don't look at it as if you damaged the best of the nizik's property. You evaluate what the value of the damage actually is, and then you have to give payment. What kind of payment do you have to give if you don't have money? So you're paying with your properties. You have to pay with the best of your properties. That's what meitav means, but you're not paying extra. Another thing Rabbi Kiva says, v'kal v'chayim lehektish. Kal v'chayim, that this would apply to hektish as well. Now, this kal v'chayim lehektish, the Gemara will explain later. Okay, so now the Gemara wants to understand what's the pshat in Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. V'Rabbi Shmuel, what's Rabbi Shmuel saying here? That you pay extra. Ochal shmeina, if let's say your animal damaged other person's property, it ate from the best of his property and has a very high value. So mishalem shmeina, so then you pay from the best of that value. Ochal k'chusha, if your animal went and damaged and ate an inferior part of his property, also mishalem shmeina. What Rabbi Shmuel is saying is, meitav karma of the nizik, that you still have to evaluate it as if it ate the best of his property and you pay extra for this. Why should you pay extra? Why should you pay for a value that you didn't even damage at all? So Rabbi Baravin answers, Hacha b'may askinon. What Rabbi Shmuel is talking about over here is, your animal went and damaged a patch in the person's field amongst his whole entire field here. And because this field has in it areas that are better quality, areas that are bad quality, and now it's not clear whether what it ate was from the good quality or bad quality. So in such a case, the mishalim shmeina. In such a case, because it's not known, because of the suffix, the pasuk is telling you that you're going to have to pay on the best quality. But this pshat as well, Rava says, Rava says, how can you say this? If you would know for a fact that the area that your animal ate and damaged was from an inferior quality, so then you only pay for that quality, not for anything better. So now that it's a suffix, you don't know what it was mazik. Did it eat from an inferior quality? Or it ate from a fat and better quality? So mishalem shmeina. Why would we be machmer and say that you have to pay what's better? We have the rule by dine mamenes where it's a suffix how much you damage. In our case, or anytime there's a suffix in any money matter, whether you're obligated to pay or not, we always are lenient. We say that if you want to be mitzi mamen from someone, you have to bring a raya. So the nizik should have to prove that he ate from the better quality. Until then, I only pay the lesser quality. So you can't say that's what the pasuk's being machadish here. It would go against the basic rule that we have by all dinei mamanis.
So what does it mean?
So the Gemara now says a different shot. The machlokes of Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Kiva is as follows. What we're talking about over here is, and what the Gemara is about to explain is, everybody agrees you only pay the value for what you damaged. You're not paying anything extra. You have to pay idis, the best of the properties. But now the question though becomes, how do you evaluate idis? This din of idis, which is the lashon of the Gemara, or the lashon of the pasuk meitav, which is the best. How do you evaluate this meitav? So let's say the case of here is shaisa idis the nizik. The best property of the nizik is kiziburis the mazik. The mazik is a person that's much richer than the nizik, and his worst level of a property that he owns is as good as the best property that the nizik owns. So now the question is, what do you pay? Ubaha pligi. This is the machlekes of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Shmuel says sovar b'denizik shamina. Rabbi Shmuel says when it says in the pasuk meitav sedei meitav karma that you have to pay from the best. What does it mean the best? Not necessarily the mazik's best. As long as for the level of the nizik it's the best, that's the best. So the mazik might be able to get away with giving his zuburis, his worst. So you evaluate it by the level of the nizik. Rabbi Kiva however, Rabbi Kiva says no, but the masik sheminon. He has to give the payment if he's paying from properties. He has to give his best. We go according to his level, the mazik. So the Gemara brings the source of the machlokes in the pshat of the pasuk. My time in the Rabbi Shmuel. What is the reason for what Rabbi Shmuel says? Nema soda lamata v'nema soda lamayla. The term soda it says over here, meitav sadeu, meitav karmai. But it also says sada earlier when it says over there in the pasuk ki yaver ish sada oikerem, that when you damage a person's sada. So mas sada hamalamaylo, just like in the beginning of the pasuk when it speaks about sada that you damaged in a property. What field was that? The nizik. It's speaking about the nizik's property. Av sada amalamato. So too the sada that it says in the end of the pasuk meitav sadeu and meitav karmai. What is that meitav sadeu and meitav karmai? It means the nizik, that you evaluate the level of meitav, the level of idis, based on what the nizik's properties are. That's Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Kiva says, no, read the simple, without this gzeira shava, read the simple pshat of the pasuk here for itself as it says it. Meitav sadeu and meitav karma yishalem. Who's this talking about? If you read the taich of the pasuk here, meitav sadeu means the ha'echta kamashalem. It means the best of the properties of this person that's paying. So that goes on the mazik. That doesn't go on the nizik. So therefore the mazik has to always give his best. It doesn't matter if the nizik is much poorer than him, and for the nizik, the worst property of the mazik is already made of. No, the pasuk is saying you have to give from your best. Says the Gemara now, over here, this is a unique thing. You have over here a gzeira shava, which is basically oiker, the pshat of the pasuk. Says the Gemara that in our case, Rabbi Shmuel will agree that sometimes you do follow the pshat of the pasuk. But Rabbi Shmuel will tell you, ahani gzeira shava. We apply the gzeira shava as the Gemara explained before. If the mazik's ziburis is as good as the idis of the nizik, so then you can pay with your ziburis. So then we apply the gzeira shava. But vahanikra, there's also a case where Rabbi Shmuel will agree that you follow what it says in the pasuk, that the mazik is going to have to give from his idis. How is that? So the Gemara explains. Ahani gzeira shava kida kamina. Gzeira shava is as we already explained before, that he gives his ziburis just because it's the same as the idis of the nizik. But ahani kra, when are you going to say that you follow what it says in the pasuk, that you pay the idis of the mazik himself? Kagain, for example, here the lashon of the Gemara is not so clear, but I'll try to explain what the Gemara means. Kagain the islay lemazik idis v'ziburis. The mazik owns two properties. He owns a property of idis and a property of ziburis, and the idis lenizik. And the nizik also has a property of idis. But now, the Gemara doesn't say this, but what the Gemara means to say is, the idis of the nizik is not as good as the idis of the mazik. Okay? So, the idis of the mazik is better, And on the other hand, though, the ziburis, the mazik, the ziburis of the mazik, loy shavik idis the nizik, is not the same as the idis of the nizik. So therefore, you can't come and say that the mazik should pay with his ziburis, because that's going to be the same as the idis of the nizik. It's not. Basically, the two properties that the mazik has, the idis that he has is even better than the idis of the nizik. The ziburis that he has is better than the idis of the nizik. So what should he pay over here? So you can't say that he should pay the ziburis, because again, let me just repeat that again. I'm sorry. The ziburis of the mazik is actually worse. It's less than the idis of the nizik. So in such a case, the mishalem leim meitav the day. In such a case, he's going to pay from his meitav. The loy motzi amalei, he can't come and say to him, ta ad govim ziburis, that you should come and collect from the ziburis that I have. Why? You might think that the mazik could come and say, you don't have the right to take from my idis. My idis is better than your idis. So why should you come and take from my idis? You have to take from my ziburis. My ziburis is worth less than your idis. It doesn't matter. But on the other hand, my idis is worth better than your idis. What gives you the right to take from my idis? You should be taking from my ziburis. So in this case, the pasuk is coming to say that Ella gavi mimeitav, that over here in such a case, the mazik can't say, come and take from my ziburis, because his ziburis is worth less than the idis of the nizik. So in such a case, the mazik is going to be forced to pay from his idis, even though his idis is worth more than the idis of the nizik. So Rabbi Shmuel says, usually we could follow the Gzeira Shava. I don't know if usually, but there is a case where you follow the Gzeira Shava, and that is in a case where the idis of the nizik and the ziburis of the mazik is mamish the same. So then the mazik could say to him, come and take my ziburis, that is, which is the same as your idis. But if it's not the same, so over here, the mazik is not going to be able to be lenient with him and say, take the ziburis, which is less than your idis. No, he's going to have to pay his idis, even though his idis is more than the idis of the nizik, because that's the pasuk. Meitav sadeh, meitav karma. In this case, we apply the simple pshat of the pasuk that you have to give your best.